Hey everyone, I'm Will Allred. Probably know me from the advice I give on cold email, one of the founders here at Lavender. And today I'm joined by Jesse Ouellette. I am really excited for this conversation because we're going to dig deep into the topic of deliverability. But before we do that, Jesse, do you mind giving a quick intro for everyone to get to know you?
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Jesse, a SaaS founder here. I run a company, Lead Magic, founder of Lead Magic. And Lead Magic helps companies figure out who is on their website so they can start prospecting them, helps you identify the businesses on there. And that's kind of where we're at.
Jesse, how did you get into deliverability if that's what you're doing? I think it's like such an
Yeah. So actually, it was kind of one of those things where it's an interesting story. Actually, I was an enterprise software strategy leader. So sales strategy. I kind of been an enterprise sales leader. Then I went into strategy and I was at a company and we had a little bit of an issue with the email signature. And I was really into deliverability. I'd been into deliverability because I knew I could get more throughput with my cold email efforts as a rep or even as a frontline manager. And it really came down to, I wasn't going to take off the email signature off of my email. And I ended up actually getting fired for it. So it's one of those things. It was kind of like a call. Now, the good thing is the question like around the email deliverability was my boss and everybody supported me there. And also the engineering team and the kind of security team also said that it was an issue. So it was good that I was proven right, but it kind of was like the best thing to ever happen to me because now I run a profitable SaaS business. It's just one of those stories. You're kind of committed to that, story.
And quick backpedal for those that don't know. Because one of the things that I've noticed is when I post about the topic of deliverability, I hear folks talking about things like open rates. So I think it might be helpful to just like level that and set a definition. What is email deliverability?
Yeah, so it's really the ability to get into your customer's primary inbox. And what is important now is, right, it's a war on attention, right? So getting your customers' attention, getting your prospects' attention, right? Now, what a lot of people don't understand right now is that if we really have to break down the people who are going to have the hardest time getting in front of them, it's going to be somebody at your company that they're emailing cold new prospects, right? That's the hardest. So what's easier is if you're emailing people that you already know or you already have whitelisted or, right, you're already talking to them, that makes it a little easier to get that email across. Yep. But what a lot of companies miss is how hard now it actually is to get a brand new email into a new company, because that is the number one attack surface for security professionals to block. So they have to be almost too cautious to prevent you there. So it's kind of a twofold. It's not only do they want to make the user experience better on email delivery or for that user that's getting the emails, because they want to get some of the spam out of there that they would consider to be emails they don't want. And they want to make sure that they can get the security. They don't want to get phished, right? Because you're not supposed to click on links. You're not supposed to do all these other things in the enterprise. And that's really what I think people are missing is you're basically having to think almost as somebody who's going to have to get around those spam filters and the type of behavior you're going to need to actually do with the company. You're going to have to go through those spam filters the way that maybe even a hacker would, right? So that's kind of what's interesting.
Yeah, it's fun. Like I always talk in my content about mental spam filters. The idea of you as an individual are categorizing instead of reading like your actual message. And so like a lot of times what happens is before they even read what it is that they're reading, they've sort of looked at it and said, it's probably a sales note. And then they don't really give it the time of day. This conversation is really about making sure that even has an opportunity to happen, right?
Yeah.
Well, so many folks don't realize that they're not even making it. I'm curious because I've seen some of the news around like Apple Mail introducing like the idea of blocking open tracking and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Have you found that there's good ways to measure if this is happening?
Yeah, so the whole concept is very interesting. So if you know the whole history of it, and you're kind of the people that are really good at it are a lot of e-commerce marketing. But what I could talk to you about a little bit is that what you mentioned there, the Apple protection is an interesting topic. So what Apple's doing there is when in September roughly last year, they basically said, okay, we're going to, whenever you send us an email or whenever you send a user an email that's on our platform that prefers to have privacy on, right? They don't want you tracking them.
Mhm.
What Apple has decided to do is they decided to open the email for them on a private relay IP address or server, right? Now, what that does is it prevents the person on the other end. So that at that moment, it inflated a lot of the open rates, which is what a lot of people don't understand. The ITP, which is called it's their privacy relay server that they have, they're actually opening the email for you. So everybody's open rates should have gone up a little bit around that time. SendGrid has the best data on this if you want to go review how much it would have gone up.
Yeah.
But what also happened is at the same time, there's been way more training data and more people that are like clicking on report spam and those types of things. So what's happening is more and more of these behaviors are being detected by the machine learning models. So they're able to figure out, hey, if you're an SDR and you just fired off 3 of the same email at the same domain, I mean, NGMI, you're going to have a big problem, not going to make it, right? The rest of your emails might not even make it to any of the other inboxes.
Yeah. Okay. So open tracking the absence of opens. So what you're describing with Apple, those emails still made it to the inbox.
Well, you don't know. So what's interesting about the open rate there, it's not a huge percentage of people that actually have that on the way that it would kind of misrepresent your open rates. But what it did is it basically said, okay, if you're on the phone, there's when it pops up with the privacy. Do you want to let that happen? What it is it's the pixel in that email, right? There's a 1-by-1 pixel. And what that pixel does is it sends the data back to your mail program or your marketing automation. And then if you ever do anything else with that company, they can track you, meaning they can track you on the website, they can track you on all of the other avenues, and they know you and they can put you in ad campaigns based on that. There's a lot of advantages they get. But if Apple opens it for them, they don't have that luxury of doing that.
So I think what's interesting here is I'm thinking of it very much so on traditional email reporting metrics, right? I'm thinking about, okay, well, how do we track this? Is it the open rate? Is it reply rates? What are the things that you're looking at that say you have a deliverability problem?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Will. I think what people should look at first is to really understand deliverability. You've got to look at your open. That's the number one kind of, well, first thing you do is you want to check and make sure you have all of the domain settings on right? Do a mail test or MX Toolbox lookup record check. That can be done with your IT team. You can send yourself an email, and then you can check the header and see if it works. I've put out a couple of videos on this. They're on my profile if you want to find out how to do that. I've walked people through it. Then when you're sending email, remember there's a little bit of that decision of if that's actually going to go through is actually on the side of the user. So the user, their inbox, meaning their like IT or their however their security is set up, that user, if that open rate is low, so if you're sending a lot of cold emails and you're below like a 40% cold email rate, just remember that 60% of the people are not seeing the email, right? And remember, some of that portion is the Apple use case that I said. You're starting with an even lower number. Really good cold email delivery people realize that the delivery is just as important as the message, because then you're getting a faster feedback loop on your message. So you can take all the great tactics that Lavender and you're talking about, and you can actually put those into motion. What a lot of people don't realize is they're not actually able to get any feedback loop because none of their emails are actually going into the inbox where their customers can open it.
This is such an interesting topic because like I talk with teams all the time. Our dashboard gives recommendations based off of your data, but also off the data that we see across millions of emails. And one of the things that I track a lot is, well, why is it not defaulting to my recommendations yet? I'm like, because you haven't gotten enough replies. There's not enough actual signal in the amount of emails that you've sent for us to, if you send 100 emails and get 100 replies, really strong signal, right? If you send 100 emails and get 1 reply, there's not a lot of signal there. And so what you're getting at is it's hard to obtain that signal if 50, 60% of your emails aren't even landing.
Yeah. It's a great point, Will.
That's such an interesting way to think about it. So I love that folks have gone down this rabbit hole for me.
It is a rat hole. That's what I will say. I mean, you get really deep. And in fact, it's creating a lot of opportunity to either partner with your IT team, or if you're a rep who's kind of got a little bit of an IT background, maybe you did break fix for your grandparents when you were younger, you might want to learn how to do it. There's a lot of value in getting a lot of emails delivered right now.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it's an opportunity to differentiate 100%.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
Okay. So on this Apple note, just because I like to go down these little rat holes, is okay. So Apple does it one way. I've also read that like Microsoft does it as well. So like Microsoft is blocking images from opening, and so it might not register.
Microsoft, for whatever reason, it seems like some of this changes, right? It's user experience. It depends if they're using the mobile app on Outlook. It depends if they're using the Office Outlook version or either the web version, but the reality is coming, right? What they're trying to do is they're trying to prevent you from having the information where that user on the other end knows everything about you based on you opening that one image, right? If you think about what is in an image when you download it, you're downloading it, and now that end user, that person who's tracking that image, they know where your location is, whether you're opening it. And if they're really good with marketing tools, right, if they've really figured out analytics, they know that that pixel actually drives every single thing on the internet, because they can, some of the more advanced customer data platforms out there, you can start to signature people, right? And you can start to match them, and you'll know where they are. And this is where a lot of opportunity is for really good technical marketers. But the point is companies or businesses or all the email providers are starting to get it to a point where they do not want you to know all about their users. So Apple took a very big stand. Obviously, Office and Outlook are adding more. I noticed Google is also making it easier to report spam now. If we had to predict where it's going to go, it's going to get a lot harder to deliver thousands of emails, especially sequences.
Yeah, and wrapping that piece up on the CDP side, right?
Yep.
We built MarTech for 2 years. I'm well aware. Like if you have a pixel on somebody's device, what you can then do is essentially enrich it with third-party data, like a LiveRamp, for example. And I could know quite a lot of details about that individual, but I could also go find other individuals that look like them, advertising, etc. There's really strong reasons for why people want to do those things, why marketing teams want to do those things and should. But yeah, it's become this bit of a cat and mouse game. But I think on top of the cat and mouse game, which is a conversation I want to go down a bit, I think there's also this notion of what is, if the cat and mouse game's a bit more abstract, right? The concrete side of it would just be like the piping that goes between these inboxes. One of the things that you mentioned to me in an earlier conversation is like, it's just protocols.
So there's people who are shying away from email. And I'll just tell you what's really interesting about email is if you develop a competitive advantage here, it can be pretty lethal, right? And a lot of great companies started really just with cold email, right? And a couple reasons why. So clearly you could send a lot of emails for very low cost. And what's nice about it is you're not paying the increase. Right now, everybody that is on, look at LinkedIn's kind of $8 per 1,000 impression, whatever it is. Email doesn't change, right? It's an internet protocol. It's not like it's a social media where you have an algorithm and then you have pricing on their ads. Email is a delivery method that has been around since the 60s, right? So what's happening is if you develop a competitive advantage here in your organization with data, with how you track it, how you send it, whatever, you're protecting yourself for a very long time to be able to test messaging. And remember, the only thing you're going to have to ever really worry about is, okay, maybe GDPR in Europe. But if you have the right intent, or meaning you're going after the right types of people with legitimate interest in the US, right? I'm not giving any legal advice here, but you're able to email people, and it's a very good way to get to people. And a lot of the people who don't like email right now are the people who are trying to use the tools that aren't set up right in their organization, and they're getting no response. Now, I wouldn't like email either, but if you just throw in the towel there, you're leaving a huge opportunity on the table.
Everybody has an inbox, right?
Yeah, every company has email, right? And then if this week it's a vote post on LinkedIn that's going to get your algorithm going up, email, it doesn't matter. It's going to happen. The only thing you have to watch out for are the spam filters. And you need to understand how to evade those spam filters if you're going to want to, and evade them by demonstrating behavior that would not look like somebody who's sending a good amount of spam, or you want to demonstrate that you get responses, basically.
Yeah.
Is really key.
Quick blocking and tackling there. Talking about sort of like the protocol idea. I've always sort of laughed at the notion of like email as the original like Web3 project. But if you're a sales rep at a company and you're trying to figure out like, is the technical stuff set up correctly? What should they be doing? How should they be thinking about this?
So I've thought about this a lot. The first thing you should do is go run a check, run like an MX toolbox on the header, or go to like Mail Genius or one of those pretty accurate ones. Run a test, see what comes back. What you're going to want to look for is you're going to want to look for DMARC needs to be on. You're going to want to look for DKIM. It's another setting on there that needs to be on. You're going to want to look for SPF. That needs to be on. If you're using a sales engagement platform like Outreach, SalesLoft, you're going to want to look and make sure that if you're using Open, you need to make sure that it's hosted at your company's domain. You have to set that up in Outreach separately. A lot of people miss this step.
That's one that I've never heard. So I know the DMARC, DKIM, SPF, right? It's basically internet protocol that's telling the inbox over here that this is actually coming from the inbox over there. And it's actually associated with this website. Yeah. Basically just certified. Open tracking being tied back to your domain. I guess what's the risk there? Is that
it's much lower than those other ones being off, but it is. I'll tell you where the actual impact comes from. Let's say you're an enterprise account sales rep, and you're emailing JP Morgan Chase, JPMC as one of your accounts, or you're emailing any other really financial institution, right? Or any other company that has security, like really high security. You are going to have an issue if you have any of this stuff off. So that's one of the ones that the spam filters will pick up on that if you don't have the open tracker on your own domain. This is usually a sales ops step that gets missed. I find this step is missed in about 50% of the people that I work with right now. It has to be hosted on your own domain, and there's instructions to set this up. So you talk to your sales ops team, make sure they have that on. That helps a lot to get you into that primary inbox, which is where you want to be, because nobody's hearing about your product if you're in the spam folder.
Yeah, well, especially in the enterprise, right? That's probably an easy filter for their IT team to be like, look at all this spam that we avoided.
Yeah, there's a huge impact right now on companies that I'll kind of tell you where you're going to see some real risk if you're in this situation. So there's some things that can offset and kind of help you, right? I'll tell you what helps you. Responses help you. Okay, so what I mean by that is if the aggregate of everybody at your company is getting about a 30% response rate, 40% response rate. Now, what I see happening is companies are starting to hire SDRs. The SDR comes on, or the sales rep comes on, and of course they want to make an impact. They want to have new prospecting or new accounts, and they want to generate pipelines so they don't get fired. The problem is if you give them sort of a free rein on that, what they could do is they could send 1,000 emails, and the typical response rate on 1,000 emails is like a 5% response rate. But if you get about a 5% response rate for your cold emails, that probably won't throw it off. The problem is if you do that and you get a 0%, your company needs to be at about a 30% to kind of be safe. Right. You just put them over the reputation edge, and now everybody is having a problem delivering emails, which is a huge issue for companies right now.
What I think the thing to think about with this is, okay, you've got other departments within the company having external conversations, right? Which I think about ourselves as an early stage company. I'm like, dang, maybe we should go hire just like a CSM just to boost our credit score of getting.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I think about this. And I'm like, okay, so it's across the entire board. So one of the things that I see reps do is I'm doing my part to boost response rates. It's sort of like an interesting argument, not thinking about like around the sales process. I'm like, well, we should actually be across the entire organization, because just because you're doing it doesn't mean you're going to like not land in spam. It's because the entire organization is approaching this incorrect. And one of the things that I think about on top of that is each inbox's response rate. It's the total aggregate of emails.
Right.
And so sales is inevitably going to create the most weight in this equation because they're inevitably doing the most emailing externally.
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, and the other problem with it is this isn't a simple problem, and I'll tell you why. Because in marketing, you can go out there and you can say, all right, we're going to get our own dedicated IP and we're going to just start protecting the reputation of this.
Right.
Okay. Now you can't do that with sales, or you shouldn't do that. I mean, there's people that are trying that and they're talking to me about it. I'm like, that's not a good idea. But what they do is what you don't realize about cold email, right? There's going to be a much higher probability that somebody actually clicks the report spam button. And your goal is to take the feedback and make sure that doesn't happen by not writing bad copy emails that piss people off, right? Even some of these thoughts bump stuff, like, you're playing with fire there a little bit, right? I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but a lot of people aren't taking in the aggregate, right? You really need to have somebody looking across the whole team and starting to map this back. This is probably an ops function.
Yeah.
But that person's going to have to partner with IT as well, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting problem, right? Because an SDR listening to this is going to be like, I don't know.
Scared.
Every person on my team's response rate is, right? And so they're inevitably going to make some noise. And then, maybe some sales leaders are watching this and they're like, what do I do? How can you get a better grip of response rate?
Yeah. Well, the easy answer is not an easy answer in a lot of companies because of security. So the easy answer is what an agency would do, or somebody who has less restriction on what they can do internally with IT, they do something called email warm-up. This is the practice of you're joining a network of people. There's a lot of them out there, and you're basically sending emails back and forth that are kind of just conversations that are not real, right? And that's going to artificially boost your engagement score on your emails. And that sometimes is enough to help put it back the right way. That's what most people, and that's, by the way, that's what e-commerce marketing people do as well. You don't see it, it's under the hood, but that's actually how they do it. So this is happening. It's just harder to do it on your G Suite.
When you say e-commerce marketing, you're talking about like the marketing systems that are sending like the promo deal for.
Yeah, they're like, if you get on SendGrid and you do a warm up, there's a bunch of, they're warming that IP address up with, they're sending out those emails, but you're not seeing them. Where it's weird with cold email warm up is that you're seeing the email responses back and forth. And I've talked to a few people who have like, I tried warming up my domain, but I got all these weird kind of back and forth emails from the warm up network. And I'm like, well, that's what you're supposed to get. And then they're like, well, I just put them in spam and I deleted the prompt. And then I'm like, well, that's not good, because now you hurt the warm up network, right? Like that group of people are partnering, right? It's kind of like on LinkedIn, you see people that are different groups of people that are partnering up on their posts and they're doing stuff to get their engagement up. It's very similar on email. There's groups of people that are sending emails back and forth a lot.
Yeah. The idea of a LinkedIn bot is always a funny one to me.
Yep. That's the one area that you can fix there. Now that's something you're going to have to talk to your IT department with, make sure, whatever. Then the other area that is of critical importance is the actual validation of the emails.
Yeah. Okay. So first things first, you get a warmer. You start seeing weird emails show up in your inbox. Like I can attest, I have one, and I see things like banana bread recipe. And then like you open it. Unfortunately, there's actually no banana bread recipe. I wish there was, but like, the point is, like, you get these weird emails. And then next step. So you got the warmer, and now we're like, okay, things are warm. How long are we warming for, by the way?
So what we're finding is we're doing a lot of this. We have a lot of this going on. We're doing 2 weeks on a domain that is aged, which means it's like a top level domain. So it's a .com, .net, .org, one of those. .io and AI are probably in that bucket too. It's basically like areas where there's not a lot of legitimate domains, right? And what you get there is you get that up to 30%. It starts to get up to like 30, 40. And then what happens is your scores are good because you're sending out emails. You might be getting a couple of complaints, but remember, you got a lot of people still opening it on that reputation score. And you're now getting, even your other emails start to look better. Everything goes up. You're offsetting any of the negative. And let's face it, I mean, a new SDR, new sales rep coming into a new company, like they're going to get hung up on, right? Some of those first calls you're making are bad when you're cold calling. It's the same way with email, right? So you have to put the control in place to kind of protect your sales team a little bit there, right? They're going to get put in spam. They're going to get complaints.
Here's an idea. Let me know what you think of this. What if a company just spun up fake email addresses that weren't sending externally, but were on warmers to help boost the overall reputation of said company's overall sending domain.
The reality is that what you want to do, the warm-up networks have their own kind of score as well, right? People on a lot of these warm-up networks understand what's going on. So a lot of them keep their domain really healthy, right? Everything is good. So the hard part about doing what you just described would be, now there's probably one exception I'll talk about in a second, but basically that group of people, the effort that it takes to start one of those warm-ups is about as much effort as it would take. Like, it's not a trivial, like you would need to do, it's a lot of work to set up a bunch of, and we're talking volume here. Like we're talking 30 to 40% on a 50 email a day. Like that would just take a long time to get that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
why
I was thinking more, I would, spin up Tiffany, John, Jeremy at lavender.com. And they're just sitting idle within my organization, but they're on warmers. And so they have a good positive response rate.
Oh, I get what you're saying. Well, there's part of it that is the inbox, right? So there's kind of like a couple of things here. There's like the general mail flow, which is like your IP and your domain, blacklist for IP, right? And then there's also another one, which if you're emailing other Gmail or Google subscribers and you're on Google, we'll find that you kind of need to have positive scores there, right? It's all, so here's the thing. There's no, if anybody tells you they know the exact rules of these things, they don't know that. They're just confused because it's a machine learning model and it's constantly changing based on new information. So Google has their own, they're all kind of working together, right? Like they all kind of know what actions people take that are sending volume-based spam, right? I'm not talking about like cold email from an SDR. I'm talking material spam, right? And then the other thing people can do to really throw that off is send tracked links. I would never don't ever track links at all. That's a really bad practice. That'll really put you in spam.
So don't track links. Make sure open tracking is associated with your domain. Would it be better if you just turned off open tracking if you don't know?
It would. It is better. So it definitely is better. But the gains you get from getting open tracking or open is good right now. So it's at a point where it's starting to go away though, right? Like it's starting, obviously with the Apple kind of throwing it off a little bit, it's becoming less of a signal. However, I would still say there's a lot of value in keeping it on. Like what we're talking about here, it allows you to test two things really. It's the subject and how they kind of perceive it in their inbox. And then it's also the deliverability. Yeah. Both factors are pretty much equally important. And, that's going to impact that score, open score. So a lot of people think it's just the subject title. And I'm like, it's not. I mean, it's almost more delivery than it is the subject title.
Yeah. And I've always thought about it as, I've always thought of this whole topic, like credit score, right? Which is, you talk about replies being the most important thing. It's you pulled out money on a loan and you paid it back. So you put an email out there, it gets a response. It's the same thing as I swiped my credit card and then I paid the credit card company back. The thing that you were talking about with verifying email addresses, sort of the analogy that I continue to draw there, probably now just stretching this, but the idea is like I'm pulling out a loan and never had the intent to pay it back and nothing. I don't even know if that quite even captured it. Because I imagine a bunch of bounces is probably one of the worst things. It's probably worse than having a low
response. Yeah. The worst thing is the spam, is the report spam button, actually, believe it or not. If you get enough of those, you're done, right? You're done fast too, right? They do not, the numbers are so unforgiving on that there's been a lot of people who have taken some weird angles on how they're doing it now. And this would be hard to get in, but a lot of the angles that people are taking now is they're rotating inboxes, which is what we had talked about earlier before the call. Point is that if you get that report spam button, so you have to be methodical on how you think about your unsubscribe button. I'm not a lawyer on this one, but I think the best practice would be to not have an unsubscribe link. Now, I know my lawyers, they've already called me about saying stuff like this, but don't put the unsubscribe link. P.S. If you want to stop hearing from me or something like that, right? Like some comment, make them comment back because it does give them a release to get out of the email, right? But that unsubscribe link will also put you in dead spam, right? Most of the time. Now, the hard part is sometimes internally companies are, having to kind of overreach a little bit in terms of their legal departments. Sometimes and I don't want to get into the legal thing here because it's just not my area of focus, but I do know the laws of cold email, but this is an area where you can get a lot of advantages if you can do that. You do have to make sure you have a suppression list, global suppression list that you follow. And you better have some sort of detection. If you don't use the link, you better have some sort of like detection system that can figure out if the person's unsubscribing, because you're sending volume here, right? Like we obviously have something that picks up if the person puts the words like, I don't stop emailing. It doesn't happen very often. We write really high quality messages. We watch you guys a lot. So we kind of know how to write emails now. But if you do that and you have unsubscribe and you have the link, it's kind of a risk.
Yeah. Okay. So validating emails, making sure you're actually sending to an email that matters. There's a couple hot questions that people ask me all the time. I wanted to throw them by you, which is, what are your thoughts on links or videos in email?
So like I said, it goes back to that. Who are you prospecting and what kind of risks do you want to take on? What's the advantage of you actually doing that, right? So I'll tell you what works. Plain text messages always work. Getting those out there. If you can get your message across, short, simple, sweet kind of message there, you're good. Now let's talk videos. Remember, this is not social media. I'm not saying that the Vidyards or all of these are great tools. You have to take some considerations there. There is HTML in that. And when you start to get into sending HTML, you have to then take a lot of precautions of how you do it, right? So HTML is incredibly hard to get delivered properly. And all it would take would be one part of that email. And you're now recording videos, taking time, but you're really wasting your time. If you're going to send videos, send them in the DM of LinkedIn, right? That's probably the better spot for them. There's actually a recruiter, Lauren. I think she does a really good job at this. She has a lot of tips. She's part of It's Destiny Recruiting. But anyways, the point is email, keep it plain text if you can.
But does it matter if it's the first email versus a follow-up versus in conversation?
That's a great question. So the answer to that is it's much easier to get delivered or emails delivered to people who are emailing you back.
Yes.
So the second email, you could do something like that. However, the first email, if you're going broad video, very risky because it might not get delivered. And if you don't have a reputation with that customer or prospect, you're not going to get through.
What if you're replying to an original cold email?
That doesn't help either. No, because they obviously know when you're getting a response back. Now, if it's the weird one is the out of office.
Okay.
Or I'll be careful here, or the gated email.
Yeah.
Which can also be used for your benefit if you need to.
There's a gated list out there. Let me know.
It's a great way. It's a great way to find a great group of people to email because they're always decision makers. I feel bad for CEOs though. I mean, I really feel terrible for all these people getting so much spam. It's a sad cause. Sorry.
This is interesting though, because it opens up a lot of question about hyperlinking video and prospecting efforts. Because I see so many folks talk, anytime I hear somebody say to me that, click-through rate does this, I immediately have this visceral response to be like, why?
Yeah, that's not good.
You're not on the market.
Because you dumped your open rate. You totally trashed your open rate.
Yeah, I see that and I'm like,
here's why it's actually a security risk, right? So let me tell you what will happen, right? So the way that a redirect link works, right? What happens is you send a link to somebody. The link has it's like a bit.ly or one of these links, right? It's the same idea. It might even be hosted on your domain. Tough to tell, right? But the second that link points them at another company's website or your website or another link, the link has an opportunity to change.
Yeah.
Right. And the change is scary to a spam filter because a spam filter does not want your link to change after it gets delivered into the person's primary inbox where they're likely to click it. And by the way, every company has a phishing security test that they have you take. And the number one thing they tell you, never click links.
Yep.
So if you're going to do that, now you can send straight flat links if it's a blog link or something. And I probably wouldn't put a parameter on it. That can cause a little bit, but if you can just you can put parameters like UTFs are fine, but.
Interesting. The other question I get, you kind of alluded to at the beginning, is the signature line. So I tell folks when they ask me this
one hits home.
is when you're writing an email in Gmail, for example, they separate the code between what you're writing and your signature. But
so let me tell you an interesting thing. When you're copy and pasting rich text, that means there's HTML coming around with it. And all of that HTML becomes a big problem. So, and this is even when I had my own kind of battles with this, as I discussed in the beginning of the call. But what happens with a signature, this is the most risky thing I see happening. And this happens a lot of places right now. And if you're doing this, go check it right now. Literally just check it right after this interview. What happens on signatures is you'll have one person who's responsible for copy and pasting that signature and putting it into an onboarding doc. The signature is going to have their logos, and depending on who they copied the signature from, it could have link tracking on or bad open tracking on or some other link in there. Now, what I found is these things can spread viral in a company, and I made a post about this. It actually got some pretty decent, it got about 100,000 views, but a lot of people actually messaged me on the side and they're like, do I have this problem? And I checked, about 15 of the people that messaged me did. What happens is the HR, not by intent or whatever, they're not doing it maliciously. Yeah. They will put your signature that you have to put, quote unquote, have to put onto your company email. Yeah. Now that signature could be laced with every bad link that gets your emails blocked.
Yeah, tracking, it could be.
Oh, you wouldn't believe, I've torn a couple of these ones apart and I'm like, this signature has been copy and pasted across 6 different e-commerce, like every single thing is rewritten the link and it's the worst, most dangerous link. And I'm telling you, there's entire SDR teams that are sending to spam today, right now, 10:58 on a Wednesday. Like they're in the spam inbox just because of their signature. And it's sad because you want them to be effective. They just never will be if they can't get out of the spam folder.
What should they be doing with the signature line? Should it be back to the original text, right? If you have a link, flat link, if you have text, plain text, no images, keep it really simple.
Yeah, because here's where an image gets bad, right? So sometimes images, what happens on the images, we talked about the open tracker, but let's say it was a regular image and you were hosting it on Google content or whatever, which is where a lot of these get hosted. Let's say that image had text in it, right? That spam filter doesn't know what that image is going to be later when so that could also be a phish. And if you look at your personal email, if you're getting phished now, I get all kinds of spam from like Best Buy, just like different people that are trying to get passwords to credit cards and stuff. They'll send an image as the whole text. So that's a big issue, is that you'll have the image itself will actually be the way that they try to break in because they know that the spam filters are looking at the text more. So you got to be careful with images, right? And that's why you can put it in there, but you got to host it, number one, and you got to make sure that you're not copy and pasting the same signature over and over and over. That is dangerous.
Yeah. Do you have an extra like 2 minutes?
Absolutely. Yeah. This is an important subject.
I'm actually curious about this image thing because
yeah, totally.
Yeah. The idea of sending an image, custom image, is becoming a little bit more popular. It's a cool pattern break. But is that a dangerous idea? Is that something that is a risky decision?
It is dangerous, right? I mean, it depends where that image is hosted. There's a lot of variables there. I know some of the tools on List have some like personalization factors. There's also hyper, whatever the name of that product is, whatever it's called, hyper, whatever it is. There's one that will it'll be like 2 coffee cups and you'll put your name in the other one and whatever. But the point is yeah, it does add risk, right? I mean, it depends on who you're emailing. I don't want to be an alarmist on everything here. I know I already am on a lot of stuff with this stuff, but I also think that what you got to do is just think about the actual end goal. If you're doing the images, if you're doing that stuff, you're starting to turn email back into social media. It never will be, just because of the whole, and you can have fun. You can joke around. I'm not I think on social media, people should be having more fun, right? I think it's a little boring sometimes, but yeah. The gurus won't like this one, but anyways, I think the point is you could probably get away with putting an image if you hosted it right and you put it in there not as like the HTML wasn't looking weird. But every risk you take, if you send that out in a volume-based approach, meaning you're sending more than one at a time, like you're sending it to multiple people,
that's dangerous.
There's a risk, man. There's a risk there. And it's, I don't know, it just depends on your goals, right? If your goal is to get a meeting, get some interest in your products and services, it's probably not worth it across. I mean, just get one of them right, get delivery right, get the messaging like Lavender. You guys are talking about the messaging, get that right, and then just convert and build a powerhouse email system, cold email system. And you won't even need to make cold calls. You just sit there and take meetings all day.
I'm such a proponent of what you're talking about in the sense that with cold email in particular, the only goal that you should be having is to get a response. It's not necessarily forming, get them to click through. Once you get the reply, all of a sudden now, the spam filter risk goes down big time. And all of a sudden now we can start to share these multimedia files, etc.
Yeah. Start the conversation before you want to start offering up all that. I mean, it looks great. I know some people are really good with the videos. There's also some people, I would argue, I put this as an unpopular opinion. I think there's some sales development people who are kind of unfairly getting forced into these videos by their management team. And some of these videos that I'm getting, I mean, it can look like one of those like ASPCA in the arms of an angel.
Yeah.
It looks sad. I'm like, I feel bad for the person. They don't look like they want to be there. I mean, you could truly tell, right? Like you're like, oh man, when I get them on those are on LinkedIn. I mean, the ones on the email, they're in my spam folder usually. But anyways, the point is try to accomplish the goal, right, of cold email and just not social media, you know.
Let's do a quick summary. So number one, let's make sure that we have our technical things set up correctly. DMARC, SPF, DKIM, any sort of links that you'd be sending out are for your open tracking. It's all hosted on your domain. Open tracking hosted on your domain. Link tracking, don't be link tracking because it's dangerous for any sort of spam filter that's going to pick up on it. The number one thing that's going to help your deliverability is your reply rate. The number one way to track your deliver is your open rate. If you are sub 40%, you should start to be having concerns. If you do have concerns, and you should regardless, you should pick up an email warming tool. And an email warming tool is going to put some weird things in your inbox, but just trust it, let it do its thing. Make sure you're tracking to see if the email warming is being successful versus unsuccessful as well. It's a sign that network might be better or worse that you're a part of. And laser in on writing good copy so that you get more responses. So that this is
no complaints. Yeah, you want to get out of the complaints. There was one other thing in the middle there that I wanted to make sure I hit because this is actually one of the bigger problems is that validation step. So if you're an ops person, what you want to do is you want to put a control in place right before a group of your team is ready to send, and you want to validate the email. Now, what that means is you're getting data from a data provider and then you run a validation step. That validation step is critical. You need to keep your bounce rate under a certain amount. The best way to make your cold emails get better responses is send to people who have a valid email and it shows up. Now, there's a third type of email. There's a thing called a catch-all, and this is going to annoy people, right? This particular discussion, because when you run all of the Zoom info or some of the other Seamless, or we run all of these tools through, one of the things that's going to show up is a lot of their emails are going to go to either catch-all or even invalid, right? So there's only going to be a 30 to 40% group that you can email, and you're going to get annoyed by that pretty fast. There's a tip that I dropped, and I don't know if anybody saw it, but it was around how to get a lot of your catch-alls back. I'll let you go look for that on my profile, but it's basically there's a people chip button in Google Sheets. You can figure that out. That'll get some of them back. But the reality is you want to send to valid emails first. The chances of you getting a response on a valid email is way higher than anything else. And if you get a certain threshold goes low on bounces, 15% on your domain, you're done. You will not get into the inbox anymore. And I fear a lot of companies are still not validating at all. And the vendors that they buy the data from aren't recommending it and aren't telling them that they should be.
No, because that's not in their interest. But Jesse,
this is an extra step. You have to do it. It stinks. It's not fun, but you have to do it. If you don't do it, if you're not doing it today, if you don't know what it is, you're probably not doing it. And I would make sure you are. And I would control it from an ops perspective. I would not do it as do not let your team just kind of blindly send those. Now, you got to be careful with the catch-alls, right? You have to find another source. I mean, ideally, they've already kind of shown interest and they've given you their email, right? I know Nelson will be coming at me here, but
not there.
Just be nice to SDRs, Nelson. Come on, man.
Break. Oh man, Jesse, this was a blast. Folks want to connect with you. I know you've got a new community that you've been building out, but should they connect with you on LinkedIn first? Should they go straight to the community? How should they be engaging with you?
They go to Lead Magic's profile on LinkedIn or me, or they can follow me. I've got a community. I've just been basically just sharing a lot of tips. I've also got a newsletter that I provide a lot of tips in there, and I'm just trying to get the flywheel going here. And it's talking about a problem. Look, if you're going to follow up with leads that come to your website or people that come to your website, anonymous B2B traffic, you're going to probably want to get your emails delivered to those people. So that's why I'm talking about this problem. It's not necessarily my core. And that would be, I'm going to be dropping a lot of like cold email tips, but more from the technical side, right? I'm not saying I'm the best copy person or whatever. I tend to follow people like Will or Winning by Design or some of the more quality management consulting type companies that kind of focus on this. But from a technical perspective, that's where I'm strong. So that's where I'm staying in technical marketing, technical sales, like how to really drive the systems to get what you want. And really, really thank you for the opportunity to talk with you here. I really enjoy your content, and that's been A pleasure to work with you.
Yeah, I'm enjoying yours as well. It's been eye-opening. So if you haven't already, make sure you're following, make sure you're engaging with Jesse. But Jesse, appreciate the time, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Bye.